A mother's natural instinct is to protect, to nurture, and to love their children unconditionally and without limits. But Julissa Thaler, she defied this instinct in the most unimaginable way. Rather than protecting and loving her little boy, she decided to hurt him. And today's case is about a betrayal that no child should ever have to face. I'm Melissa Compton, and this is Crimealytics. Julissa Thaler and Eli Hart met when they were 19 years old, and their relationship moved quick, so pretty soon they were living together. Julissa became pregnant, and their son Eli was born on December 15th of 2015, and they all lived together in Eagan, Minnesota, which is in Dakota County. Eli was born with a genetic disorder called Townes-Brocks syndrome, and this required him to have several surgeries in the first months of his life. And then as he grew, he had to wear hearing aids and dealt with a few minor health issues, but otherwise he was a healthy and happy little boy. He loved to go fishing, loved going to the park, playing on the swings, and his favorite food was meatballs from Carbone's. He attended Shively Hills Primary School, where he was well liked by his teachers, other students, and he had quite a few friends. He was outgoing, happy, and full of energy. He brought joy to everyone who was around him. Eli spent most of his time living with his mom, Julissa. Now, Julissa had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals. She had mental health issues. She was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And she especially spent quite a bit of time in and out of these hospitals between the age of 13 and 18. And during her senior year of high school, she even left school and spent 45 days living on the streets. Minnesota Child Support Services started a file on Eli pretty much from the day that he was born because he had been exposed to illegal drugs while Julissa was pregnant with him, and it didn't get any easier on Eli. By 2017, when Eli was just 2 years old, records showed that Julissa first wasn't taking her prescribed medication, and she wasn't able to meet Eli's basic needs, and this wasn't just a one-time thing. It continued. Eli's father, Tori, was doing everything he could to see his son and to gain custody of his son, but Julissa was doing whatever she could to make sure that didn't happen. In 2019, she files for a restraining order telling authorities that Tori was abusing her, he was threatening to kill her, and he was violent. When they did the investigation, they found evidence proving that she made it all up just to keep Tori from seeing Eli. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. She repeatedly did this to keep Tori away from Eli. And even her own father backed up Tori and said first he wouldn't do this. And on some of the occasions that Julissa said these events happened, Tori wasn't even in town. In October of 2020, officials removed Eli from Julissa's house because social workers made a visit and the house was just in horrific condition. And poor Eli was standing there, didn't have any clothes on, and the only thing they could find him to wear in that entire house was pajamas. The house was filthy. There was water everywhere because an upstairs bathroom had leaked. Someone had cracked eggs and smeared them everywhere, the walls, the floors, and there was food laid out everywhere that had rotted. It smelled. It was disgusting, and they put him into foster care. But that was just temporary because just a short time later, they took him back home to Julissa. In January of 2021, Julissa returned to the hospital where she told physicians that she was hearing voices that were telling her to harm herself and that she felt trapped by delusions and paranoia. And mental health issues are absolutely real and they require physicians to treat them. But mental health issues are also a red flag, not just to herself, but anyone around her. So at this point in time, Eli was removed from her home for a longer period of time. This time when Eli went to foster care, he got to live with a family member. And the family member said, due to several false orders of protection filed by Eli's mother, Tori could not have a relationship with Eli. But starting in January of 2021, Eli spent 11 months living in my home at that time. During that time, Eli and Tori were able to start a relationship, and their bond was powerful from the start. Eli fell in love with his father and loved spending time with him. Tori was excited to make up for all the lost years and was thrilled to start teaching his son how to fish and to ride a bike with no training wheels. In late December of 2021, Eli moved back in with his mother for a trial visit, and Tori filed for custody because he was worried about Julissa. She had an unstable living situation. She had past convictions, the drug use, and the ongoing mental health issues. But things were about ready to get a whole lot worse. Beth Durner and Jennifer Strieflin were social workers who were assigned to Julissa's case, and they made regular reports back to the court, and they were not good. They said that Julissa broke the rules, she skipped her drug test, and she ignored limits set around her son. Inside of her apartment was disgusting, it was dirty, there was spoiled food left out everywhere, and she tested positive for. And if all of that madness wasn't bad enough, she also exposed her young son to inappropriate images of women. Julissa told her therapist that there was a time that she left Eli standing on a cliff while she went to get a sippy cup. So apparently they had a sippy cup and it flew away in the wind, and she put a rope around herself, lowered herself down to get the sippy cup, leaving Eli standing on this cliff with no one to watch him. And when the therapist asked her basically, why would you not just buy a new sippy cup? She just looked at the therapist and didn't say a word, like she was crazy for even asking that. And it makes everyone wonder, including me, what were your priorities that day that you valued a sippy cup over the safety of your son? And then just weeks after telling the court Julissa wasn't ready and flagging concerns about her mental health, how she took care of Eli, the situation with the apartment, and many other huge red flags, both social workers signed off on Eli being put back into the home with his mother. Tori tried his best to fight for custody of Eli, but Julissa was doing everything that she could to make sure that didn't happen. She kept filing false protection order after false protection order, and that just stalled the custody hearings again and again and again. Family, friends, everybody was calling CPS saying, please don't do this. If you give Eli back to her, something bad is going to happen. But no one listened. And on May the 10th of 2022, Julissa was granted full custody of Eli. And then just 10 days later, the unthinkable happened.
Family members of a young boy tragically killed say they have been fighting for his safety for over a year. They're identifying him as 6-year-old Eli Hart. His remains were found inside a trunk during a traffic stop near Orono Friday. While Orono police have not confirmed the boy's identity, his father's fiancé says the two had been locked into a custody battle with Eli's biological mother they would eventually lose. Yesterday, they shared their grief and frustration, as well as introducing us to a boy they say had a smile and a heart that could win over just about anyone. Tonight, we're continuing to dig deeper, talking to more people who cared for Eli shortly before they say he died. We're also looking more closely into court documents that detail his return to his biological mother. Our Adam Duxter shares how Eli's foster family is mourning his loss.
I don't know how he always had a smile on his face.
A memorial in the front yard of Nikita Kronberg's Randolph home. Now a tribute to 6-year-old Eli Hart, who she says for almost a year became like another child for her and her husband.
He was an amazing kid. He was full of energy, always smiling. He is so outgoing. He always wanted to befriend everyone.
Kronberg had known Eli since he was born. His mother, Julissa Thaler, cousins with her husband, Stephen. In January of 2021, concerns about Thaler's mental health led Child Protective Services to get involved and led to the Kronbergs becoming 6-year-old Eli's foster parents for almost a year.
I feared if she got custody back that she would harm Eli, if not worse.
On May the 20th of 2022, between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., Mound, Minnesota police responded to a 911 call. The caller said they saw a suspicious vehicle that just had a completely shattered back window and they were riding on a rim. Police pulled over that silver car and behind the wheel was Julissa, and she was all alone.
There is no tire there. All right. There's what?
There's blood all over the car.
I have a broken windshield and I'm missing a tire because some kids were shooting at my car.
According to a search warrant, Julissa gave them an address and apartment number for Bayview condos, and the officer spent about 30 minutes talking to her and seeing if the car was related to an incident that was outside of their jurisdiction. And she began to get frustrated. She didn't want to answer any questions. She didn't want to sit in the back of the police car. She kept saying she was code, so they drove her home at that point. Officers see what they believe is blood and tissue, so they impound the car so they can take a deeper look. And they're taking photos on the inside and on the outside, and they see a red shotgun shell in the cup holder. Then they look in the trunk and they see the shotgun, and then they see a gray blanket that looks like it has more blood and tissue. And in that gray blanket, officers find Eli Hart's body, and he has just massive injuries to his face. They quickly made their way to the apartment building where Julissa said she lived. They knocked on the door and no one answered. They forced their way inside and looked around, but Julissa was gone. They checked the surveillance footage from the building, and right before they got there, Julissa and a man carrying a backpack had left. So let me say this, and I'm not in the habit of saying anything bad about the police because for the most part, they do the best they can with what they have. But I don't understand this one. I live in Kentucky, and if I had a window that was shattered like that and was riding on a rim like that, I would not have been able to leave the scene. I'm cold. Here's a jacket. I don't want to get in the back of your car. Well, then sit on the concrete. But the only place I would have been driven was to the jail after they ripped that car apart and found what was in that trunk. So again, not knocking the police, just trying to understand what happened and why. Thankfully, it didn't take the officers long at all to catch up with Julissa and the man that she was with and take them into custody. And it turned out that the man she was with was her boyfriend, but he was released rather quickly because he had absolutely nothing to do with what Julissa had done. When the autopsy report came back, it showed that Julissa had shot Eli 9 times while he sat in the back seat.
Spring Lake woman charged with shooting and killing her 6-year-old son faced a judge for the first time today, and there were lots of questions regarding how a mother with a court file full of red flags could be granted custody less than 2 weeks before she allegedly murdered her son.
Julissa Thaler is accused of shooting young Eli multiple times Friday, putting his body in the trunk of a car. Lou Ragoose poured through hundreds of documents today. He joins us now with what he's learned. Lou?
Well, Randy and Julie, court records reveal the great lengths Julissa Thaler went to keep Eli from his father, who social workers noted was a positive influence on the boy. Yet, Thaler received custody.
Everybody failed him.
Just about anyone who's heard of the tragic case, the shooting death of 6-year-old Eli Hart, allegedly at the hands of his mother, has the same question. How did she have custody of him?
I am just outraged that people could fail a 6-year-old little boy like.
Julissa Thaler has been filing reports regarding Eli's dad, Tory Hart, since she was pregnant. In this St. Paul police report, she accuses him of then later admits, quote, because of her mental health issues, she constantly accuses Hart of things he doesn't do. Tory Hart has never been charged based on Thaler's reports, and social workers note there's no evidence her accusations are true. But court records reveal the father filed for custody in March, and a week later, Thaler bought the shotgun she's now accused of using to kill her son. A child protection case had been ongoing since January 2021 when Thaler was hospitalized, according to court records, hearing voices and having paranoid delusions. As late as 2 weeks ago, officials overseeing the case told the judge they still had a number of concerns, including Thaler's mental health and her repeated attempts to keep Eli from seeing his father. But they still recommended the court give Thaler custody and close the protection case, in part to clear the way for Eli's father to fight for custody in family court. A judge agreed on May 10th, and Eli returned to Thaler's home full-time. 10 days later, the child was dead, his mom in jail charged with killing him, and everyone else wondering why all those red flags weren't enough.
The system didn't do enough to protect him.
Now, an expert in child protective services explained to KARE 11 that in Minnesota, an active CPS case would have to be closed, just like this one was, before a custody case could then proceed in court. Now, despite all the red flags, those overseeing this case stated in the court documents that they did not think Eli would be in, quote, physical harm when he's in his mother's care.
In Julissa's criminal case, the court questioned her competency. Did she even understand the charges she was facing? So they did an evaluation, and ultimately it was decided that she did, so she went to trial in February of 2023. Julissa's defense, it was simple. I didn't do it. And her defense attorney pointed out no one saw her do it, no one heard her talk about it, there was no history of violence, and no one saw the crime take place. But prosecutors pointed out that Julissa had bought a shotgun, and when she did, she told the clerk, I need a gun that will blow the biggest hole in something, and then she bought 40 shotgun shells. Prosecutors also pointed out that detectives found Eli's booster seat in a dumpster with a large hole where his head would have rested. They also found his backpack in the same dumpster covered with blood, with his homework still inside. Then prosecutors talked about her search history. So let me let you in on a little secret that you may not know. When you do something on any browser, on any device, whether it's a PC, an iPad, an iPhone, an Android phone, and whether it's illegal or it's not illegal, and you delete the cookies or you delete the history, it's not gone. My husband's a data center architect, and I spent 25 years as an IT analyst, and in about 10 minutes, we can tell you exactly where you've been and exactly what you've done. If we have to go back to binary code and get the ones and zeros or the machine language, we can retrieve it, as can any police analyst. So don't think just because you use something like that and you clear the cookies and you clear the history that it's gone, because it's not. Now let's look at what she actually Googled. How to keep a child from other parent with visitation. How much blood can a 6-year-old lose? How to fake car insurance claim. How much whiskey to give a baby. Payment from life insurance if a child dies. Most expensive life insurance for a child. How much does life insurance pay for a dead child? How to fake being home from cops. Best whole life insurance policy for a child. How to commit a crime and blame a child. Does life insurance cover drowning? Qualifying accidental deaths. Most powerful knockout drug. Student loans for 6-year-old kid. What length am I allowed to saw off a shotgun barrel? I know we can't go on the Google searches alone, but how in the world could somebody Google all of that, then sit there with a straight face and say, I didn't do it, there's no proof, there's no evidence? I don't understand, because what reason in the world would you have to Google all of that? I don't know. To me, it shows motive. It shows pre-planning and premeditation. But again, I know we can't go just on the Google searches, but I think that they're a giveaway. They showed that Julissa called an insurance broker about getting a $250,000 insurance policy on herself, but she didn't qualify. So then she asked them about a $400,000 insurance policy on her son. Well, they explained to her that the maximum you can get on a child is $50,000. And they offer her smaller amounts like $20,000, $25,000, but she refused and she was adamant about $400,000. Now, why that is, I don't know. I tried to research it and find some information and I couldn't. So I don't know what the significance of the $400,000 is, but she didn't want anything less than that. It was 3 months after Julissa went in for those insurance policies that the broker got a Google News alert about Eli's murder, did some research because he was thinking this cannot be the same person I met, realized by the paperwork that it was, and he immediately called the police to share the information that he had about Julissa. Robert, who was Julissa's boyfriend when the murder happened, took the stand and he talked about how they met in high school, lost touch, reconnected in 2022, and gave some details about the hours leading up to Eli's murder.
Devastating details in court today as the jury heard from Julissa Thaler's boyfriend about the hours leading up to Thaler leaving with her son Eli Hart. No one would see the 6-year-old alive again after that. Lou Raguse has covered this entire trial. He joins us now live from the Hennepin County Government Center. Lou?
Hey guys, Robert Pickerainen was a highly anticipated witness because he was initially arrested with Julissa Thaler, then released once police realized he had nothing to do with the crime. His testimony was difficult to listen to, but very helpful for the prosecution. These images from 11:22 p.m. on May 19, 2022 are the last showing 6-year-old Eli Hart alive. In heartbreaking testimony today, Robert Pickerainen filled in gaps for the jury about what happened leading up to those images and what happened when Eli's mother, Julissa Thaler, returned to the apartment the next morning. Pickerainen testified while choking on tears that he and Eli were playing with kittens in Thaler's apartment at 11 p.m. on a school night when Eli started to get rowdy. He woke up the next morning by Thaler doing laundry right after her first interaction with police. Pickerainen said he assumed Eli was at school. I said, "Where did you go?" She was kind of like, "I had to go do something." Prosecutors say after leaving the apartment, Thaler shot Eli 9 times with her shotgun. The defense so far has not suggested an alternative theory other than that Thaler didn't do it. When questioning Pickerainen, they pointed out that he told police he didn't think Thaler could hurt Eli. "I didn't think so, no. She was a very sweet person," he testified. Now, Pickerainen's opinion of Thaler has since changed. He told me after his testimony today that he wants nothing to do with her. He hopes she gets what she deserves, and he hopes that she rots in prison.
Prosecutors showed this picture of Eli with his mom pushing him on the cart and said he probably thought they were going on a fun and awesome adventure, and he had no idea what was waiting for him. It only took the jury 2 hours to find Julissa Thaler guilty. Julissa was sentenced to life in prison, and she showed absolutely no remorse, no regret, no shame, nothing. And she completely disrespected the judge and everyone in that room with her response during her sentencing.
Ms. Thaler, you have a right to speak this morning if you'd like. You don't have any obligation to speak, but if you'd like to choose to speak, now is the time to do it.
Yes, I would like to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm innocent. You all, you're garbage. That's all, Your Honor.
Ms. Thaler, I don't know that that's appropriate here.
Sorry, I told you what somebody else can.
What I would say is, the worst thing that seems to happen to parents is to lose their child. It's worse, though, when you don't lose your child to something like cancer or an accident. It's when someone takes that child from the world. What I can't imagine, nobody can imagine, is when the person that takes a child from the world is the one that brought that child in. But that is what the jury concluded you did, and I respect the jury's judgment, and I respect Minnesota's decision about what the appropriate consequence is. Nothing I do would bring justice to this situation. Nothing I do will relieve any of the pain that you caused by doing that. But what is, according to law, the just and fair sentence for what you did is what Mr. Hart said, and that is life in prison without the possibility of parole. So I will judge you guilty of first-degree murder and issue that sentence. I will not impose any sentence.
I can't hear you over your stomach grumbling.
The bottom line is that you are being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Ms. Thaler. I'm not going to impose any kind of fine or fees. I will require that you submit a DNA sample. As I mentioned, I'll keep restitution open for 60 days.
Tori sued DCSS, blaming guardian Sherry Larson and caseworkers Beth and Jennifer for Eli's death. He said that the social workers kept the courts updated on Julissa's parenting, and while Julissa may have pulled the trigger, the county is to blame for ignoring warning signs and family concerns. Despite the red flags, the department said Julissa's son wasn't in danger, and Tori's lawyer said better decisions would have kept Eli safe. Sherry Larson was dismissed from the case, so that only left Dakota County, Beth Durner, and Jennifer Streflin as the defendants. And in December of 2024, a settlement agreement was reached between all of the parties for $2.25 million. Now, that is not going to bring Eli back. However, it sends a message that what happened should not have happened, and maybe keep it from happening again. In July of 2022, about 200 people came together to raise money to build a playground in Eli Hart's honor. In March of 2023, the Eli Hart Foundation was recognized as a 501c3 nonprofit, and they are on a mission to raise awareness for children in foster care. The Mound City Council approved the playground in December of 2023, and in July of 2024, there was a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and the Eli Hart Memorial Playground at Surfside Park in Mound, Minnesota, officially opened. You can visit their website at elihartplayground.com for more information. Eli Hart was taken at such a young age under terrible circumstances. But thanks to his family and friends and his community, his memory will live forever. That's our case for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please be sure to click the like, subscribe, and notification bell so that you get any updates and new cases as they are released. You can catch the podcast on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and more. If you have a case suggestion, there's a link for that in the description. And if you want more true crime, be sure to connect with me on social media at Crimealytics or visit my website at crimealytics.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe out there.